Cleopatra, the last pharaoh of Egypt. Part 1. Introduction and Learning Strategy. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our channel. Before we dive into the incredible life of the most famous woman in ancient history, I have a small request. If you want to support our mission of making English learning fun and historical, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps us more than you know. Today we are using the active immersion technique. This is one of the best ways to improve your English at a B1 level. Here is how it works. 1. Listen and read. Follow the text while you listen to the audio. This connects the sound of the word to its spelling. 2. Context clues. If you hear a word you don't know, don't stop the video. Try to guess the meaning from the story. 3. Shadowing. Later, try to repeat the sentences exactly as the narrator says them to improve your accent. Now, let's talk about Cleopatra. When you hear her name, what do you think of? Beauty? Makeup? Gold? For centuries, history has told us she was a dangerous woman who used her looks to control men. But what if I told you that everything you think you know is wrong? What if she wasn't actually a beauty icon, but a brilliant politician, a master of 9 languages, and the only person who almost brought the Roman Empire to its knees? Today, we go behind the myth to discover the real Queen of the Nile. Stay with us until the end, because the way she chose to die is still one of history's greatest mysteries. Part 2. The Princess of Alexandria. Our story begins in 69 BC in the city of Alexandria, Egypt. But here is the first surprise. Cleopatra wasn't actually Egyptian. She was Greek. Her family, the Ptolemies, had ruled Egypt for nearly 300 years after the death of Alexander the Great. Alexandria was the New York City of the ancient world. It was a place of massive white marble buildings, the famous Great Lighthouse and the Great Library, which held all the knowledge of the world. Growing up, Cleopatra wasn't interested in just jewelry. She was a nerd. While her siblings played, Cleopatra was in the library. She studied philosophy, mathematics, and, most importantly, languages. In her family, most rulers spoke only Greek and refused to learn the Egyptian language. Cleopatra was different. She was the first in her line to learn to speak to her people in their own tongue. She also learned Hebrew, Ethiopic, Syriac, and many others. This wasn't just a hobby. It was her first weapon. She knew that if you speak a man's language, you own his heart. But life in the palace was dangerous. In the Ptolemy family, family love didn't exist. It was a world of poison and daggers. Her father, Ptolemy XII, was a weak king who depended on Rome to keep his power. When he died, he left the throne to 18-year-old Cleopatra and her 10-year-old brother, Ptolemy XIII. According to Egyptian tradition, they had to marry each other and rule together. Imagine being 18 years old and having to share a country with a little brother who hates you and is controlled by greedy advisors. The tension grew until a civil war broke out. Cleopatra was forced to flee for her life into the desert. She was a queen without a kingdom, waiting for a miracle. Part 3. The Carpet and the Conqueror. While Cleopatra was hiding in the desert, the most powerful man in the world arrived in Alexandria. Julius Caesar. He was a Roman general, a genius, and a man who loved power. He came to Egypt to collect the money Cleopatra's father owed Rome. Cleopatra knew this was her only chance. If she could get Caesar on her side, she could win back her throne. But how? Her brother's army was guarding the palace. If she walked through the front door, she would be killed immediately. This is where the legend begins. Cleopatra climbed into a large laundry bag, or a rolled-up carpet, as many stories say. Her loyal servant carried the bag past the guards and into Caesar's private rooms. When the bag was opened, the young queen stepped out. Caesar was shocked. He was used to people begging him for favors. But here was a woman, covered in dust but standing tall, speaking to him in perfect Latin and Greek. She didn't ask for mercy. She offered an alliance. Caesar was 52. She was 21. He was instantly fascinated, not just by her face, but by her wit and her courage. With Caesar's help, Cleopatra's brother was defeated in a bloody battle. Cleopatra was now the undisputed queen of Egypt. But she didn't just want to be a puppet of Rome. She gave Caesar a son, whom she named Caesarion, Little Caesar, to ensure that her bloodline would one day rule both Egypt and Rome. Part 4. The Golden Age and the Great Tragedy. For a few years, Cleopatra lived like a goddess. She followed Caesar to Rome, where she lived in a beautiful villa. The Romans, however, hated her. They were afraid of her influence over Caesar. They called her the foreign woman. In 44 BC, the world changed. Julius Caesar was assassinated in the Senate. Cleopatra's protector was gone. She realized she was in extreme danger, so she grabbed her son and sailed back to Egypt. Egypt was facing a crisis. The Nile was not flooding correctly, which meant crops were failing and people were hungry. A lesser leader would have failed, but Cleopatra was a brilliant manager. She opened the royal granaries and used her intelligence to stabilize the economy. But she knew she couldn't survive alone. Rome was now divided between two men, Octavian, Caesar's heir, and Mark Antony, Caesar's best general. Mark Antony was the man in charge of the East, and he summoned Cleopatra to meet him in Tarsus, modern-day Turkey. Cleopatra knew how to make an entrance. She didn't just arrive on a boat. She arrived on a floating palace. The oars were made of silver, the sails were purple silk, and the air was filled with the scent of expensive perfumes. She was dressed as the goddess Aphrodite. Mark Antony, who was a simple soldier who loved luxury and beautiful things, was completely overwhelmed. This was the beginning of one of the most famous love stories in history. But it wasn't just love. It was a business deal. She needed his armies. He needed her money. Together, they lived a life of unbelievable luxury in Alexandria. They formed a social club called the Inimitable Livers, where they spent every night feasting and playing games. Legends say they would dress up like common people and wander the streets of Alexandria, playing jokes on the citizens. Cleopatra gave Antony 3 children, and for a decade, it seemed they would rule the world together. Part 5. The Battle of Actium and the Final Breath. However, in Rome, Octavian was watching. He was a master of propaganda. He told the Roman people that Antony had been brainwashed by an Egyptian witch. He said that Antony was no longer a Roman hero, but a slave to a foreign queen. The conflict led to the Battle of Actium in 31 BC. This was a massive naval battle. Cleopatra and Antony fought together, but Octavian's forces were too strong. Realizing the battle was lost, Cleopatra fled with her ships, and Antony followed her, leaving his men behind. It was the beginning of the end. A year later, Octavian's army surrounded Alexandria. Antony, hearing a false rumor that Cleopatra was dead, fell on his own sword. He died in Cleopatra's arms. Cleopatra was now a prisoner in her own city. Octavian wanted to take her back to Rome in chains, to parade her through the streets as a trophy. Cleopatra, a woman who had lived as a goddess queen, could not accept this humiliation. On a hot August day in 30 BC, she requested a final meal. A basket of figs was brought to her room. Shortly after, the guards entered and found her dead on her golden throne, dressed in her royal robes. How did she die? The popular story says she used a venomous snake called an asp, hidden in the basket of figs. Some historians think she used a poisoned comb or a toxic ointment. Regardless of the method, she went out on her own terms. She was 39 years old. Part 6. The Legacy of the Last Pharaoh. With Cleopatra's death, the 3,000-year history of the pharaohs ended. Egypt became a province of the Roman Empire. But Cleopatra won the long war of history, while Octavian, who became Emperor Augustus, tried to destroy her reputation. He couldn't erase her name. We don't remember Augustus for his personality. We remember Cleopatra for her spirit. She wasn't just a lover. She was a survivor. She was a mother who fought for her children's future and a leader who tried to save her country from being swallowed by a superpower. Conclusion. Cleopatra reminds us that history is often written by the winners, but legends are created by the brave. She used her mind, her voice, and her culture to become the most powerful woman of her era. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this journey through ancient Egypt. I hope this story helped you practice your English and gave you a new perspective on this legendary queen. Would you like me to continue this series with the biography of another famous figure, like Leonardo da Vinci or Alexander the Great? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to check the description for the full text of this video to practice your reading. See you in the next video.